Okay, our topic is a big one, and so we are breaking this into several chunks. This is the second presentation on elder abuse and prevention, which Rachel Circle is working on a whole series. And today we'll have with us Leslie Curtis, who's a member here. And, our treasures are hidden sometimes within us, and discovered her. The speaker we were going to have today couldn't come, and so in search for someone, Gail, thank you. My cognitive is slipping. Gail suggested Leslie and knew of her. So she is definitely got a background in this, and we hope it enhances your understanding and raises questions for you. And if you have any further things that this topic that she presents today touches you and you want to hear more, please tell me, okay? Thank you. So Leslie, and oh yes, she's Director of Hospice for Mary T.
Thank you. Thank you. Like Pastor Connie said, I work for Mary T. Hospice. I've been there for 9 years. I've been a member of Zion for many years. My adult children were confirmed here. So even though I've been here for a long time, I haven't always been real active. So thanks to my wonderful cousin Dawn, her and I have, found our place, found our home, along with some other wonderful people that we met on a vacation with church when we went to Norway, made some wonderful friends. So I have put out folders, and if you don't have one, there are some others on the table with pens. And I've got a copy in there of what we're going to be talking about today. So if anybody needs folders, Pastor Connie will help hand them out. Just raise your hand if you need one. Okay, Tricia needs one in the back. I know Tricia too. Okay, so I just want to thank Mary Shea and Rachel Circle for asking me to have this conversation. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint because I'm not real savvy on that kind of a thing. But I thought maybe we'd just have a conversation. And if you have any, can everybody hear me okay? Because I kind of talk with my hands and I'm all over the place. So just raise your hand if you have trouble hearing me. Okay, so where are we? So I've made my introductions. I thanked Rachel Circle. So we're going to talk about elder abuse and the different types of elder abuse. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Let's talk about it. You don't have to wait until we're done. So I'm just going to go through some of the more common types of elder abuse that we see. Unfortunately, some of them are more common than we care to think about, but they happen. So the first one is abandonment and neglect. And so that is the most common elder abuse. And it's the definition of abandonment and neglect is when it's a desertion of the elderly person. And it's by someone who has the responsibility for providing their care and making sure that they have their basic needs met, like food, shelter, clothing. An example of neglect or abandonment is someone who is caring for the vulnerable adult, let's say who cannot walk, leaves that person alone in a wheelchair without access to food or water. And you think, well, why would anybody do that? And the reasons why there are many, but they may be feeling overwhelmed with the responsibility that they have. They may be unable to cope. They may be resentful that they were put in this situation or that they had no choice in this situation. And then in worst case scenarios, they can be vindictive. And unfortunately, the vulnerable adult is the victim. They can't always tell us what's happening. Maybe they don't understand what's happening. They can't maybe communicate what's happening because of maybe they have some cognitive decline, such as dementia. Or they could have mental illness. They could be, like I said, a vulnerable adult, and so they're not able to tell people. What was that? Oh, Krista, I know Krista too. Aphasia, yeah, that's a medical word. Krista is, I have to introduce Krista. Krista is also a member of Zion, and she is a fellow social worker. And Krista has worked in many assisted livings, rehabilitation, rehab centers. Yes. And so she has dealt with a lot of, she has hands-on experience. And I am going to call on Krista a little bit later as well. So the next one is psychological. So a psychological abuse is the second most common abuse after neglect. And it's mostly purposeful, verbal or nonverbal. It's emotional or mental anguish, such as creating fear, threats, harassment, and intimidating behavior. So so then you think, okay, why is that? Why? Sometimes you just wonder, well, why? Why would you do that? Well, that particular psychological is really to gain power and control. And that's part of the wheel or the cycle of abuse, is to gain power and control. And the examples could be, they may be insulting. They could be criticizing. So they're criticizing everything that this senior is doing. They may threaten them. That's a real fearful for a senior to be threatened. They may think, this is the person that's taking care of me, and they may threaten that they're going to leave me. So I can't say anything because I can't take care of myself. They could be ridiculing, shaming, intimidating, swearing at them, name-calling, lying, belittling, and ignoring. And when you think of it, all of us in this room, any one of these, how would we feel if somebody was doing that to us? And we couldn't even do anything about it. So it's, like I said, it's the second most common abuse that there is. The next one is isolation. And an example of, I'll say this. An example of isolation is when the elder is not allowed to speak for himself or herself. Caregivers, so then you wonder why. Well, it's the indifference and anger towards the elder. And again, that might happen because they're unable to cope, they're resentful. It kind of goes back to that neglect. So an example of that is that they isolate the senior by not allowing them to attend activities, to have people come over and visit. They don't let them see their mail. They restrict their phone calls. And like I said, visitors. So they truly are isolated and alone. And if it's not, they have no way of telling us, and there they are. They have no place to go or anything to do. They can't help themselves. And we don't know about it. Sexual abuse, which is horrific. Any sexual contact with a senior because of mental illness or dementia, and they can't communicate. So when you think of that, the elderly victims often have difficulties communicating because they may have, like I said, cognitive decline. They might have confusion or memory loss. And so they have the inability to report. So unfortunately, sexual abuse is very underreported. So let's go on. I'm not going to go on more to that. There's all kinds of information that you can find under all of these. But that is just one that is listed as more prevalent. Self-neglect. That one is a hard one because people can self-neglect themselves on purpose. You don't think that you can, they would, but it happens all the time. They can no longer meet their basic daily needs. So they may have personal hygiene. They're not bathing. They're not changing their clothes. They're not caring about how they present to other people. So they're not taking care of their person. They might not have enough food to eat. And that could be on purpose or it could be purposeful, that they maybe are shutting down, that they don't want to eat, or they don't want to ask for help and they can't do it themselves. They might not have the money. And that feeling of shame is a really big one when it comes to asking for that type of help. And neglecting to seek assistance for medical issues. So again, they can purposefully choose that, or they may feel shamed that I can't get to the doctor. I might not know what's wrong with me, but I'm not going to pursue that. Another thing that we can that we see is letting garbage accumulate inside the house and outside of the house. And then hoarding things and animals. And we've seen that on the news. A lot of times it might be an older person who has all of these animals or cats in their house, and they can't take care of the cats because they can't take care of themselves. So that's something else. And physical abuse. Physical abuse is when someone intentionally inflicts or threatens to inflict for physical pain or injury. So the abuse occurs at the hands of a caregiver or a person that the senior trusts. So an example of that is when a caregiver or other person uses enough force to cause unnecessary pain or injury. And I wrote down a list of physical abuse can include beating the person, biting, burning with cigarette butts on the hands, arms, legs, hitting, kicking, pinching, pushing, over and under medicating with their medications. That's something that we don't think about. They might not be giving them their medications like they should be on a timely schedule, or they're not giving it to them at all. You know, they may want them to pass away, so they're not going to give them their medications. Depriving them of food. I worked with a family, a person that was in hospice, and she kept telling us every time we visited, I'm not being presented with food. That's what she kept saying to all of us. I'm not being presented with food. She was in cognitive decline, but it was mild. So, you know, when we would talk to the son, who was her caregiver, and there was no one else in the home, it was just the son and her. And she was bedbound as well. He would deny it. He would say that she is choosing not to eat. And this was an ongoing thing with her. So that's the type of things. Now, another thing with cognitive decline, people with cognitive decline, some of the things that they may say are true, but some of the things that they might say are not true. So it's not something that you want to just jump on right away. It's talking to other people, it's talking to other caregivers, it's watching, observing, till you can put something together. That is, it's awful to see, though, when you see it. Sometimes we see people in care centers, and they'll have like an unexplained bruise on their arm, let's say. That could be abuse, but it also could just be that the caregiver was helping this person up, and elderly people have frail skin and bones. And listen, look at this right here. My daughter's dog, and he wasn't biting me, but he jumped, you know, and here I am with this. So that's not abuse, but that's kind of like that bruising happens really quickly, can happen really quickly. But if somebody was being abused, you would see that more often. You would see more bruises. You would see possibly broken bones, particularly people who have like osteoporosis, where their bones are brittle. And sometimes it can be just moving them and their arm will break. So that's not always abuse either, but it's something to be, again, watchful of. And then financial, I thought this statistic was really something. 1 in 20 seniors suffer financial abuse. 1 in 20. Yeah, I was really surprised about that. And it's illegal or unethical exploitation of the person's money, property, or other assets. Or unauthorized bank withdrawals, check fraud, misuse of credit cards, scams, and theft of property. And scams are real big out there in this world today. And I just want to tell you just one little story about this. My mom is going to be 90 on May 12th, and she is very active. She still drives. She still plays golf. She's still very involved in her church. So that's her. She called me not too long ago. This was a couple of months ago, and told me that she called me from her cell phone, but she was talking to this person on her landline. And she told me that she had won money from the Publishers Clearinghouse. And at first I just laughed at her, and I said, "Mom, no, you didn't." Well, I could hear this guy talking to her, and he was telling her to hang up the phone to me. And what I realized is that she was listening to him more than she was listening to me. Now, if anybody know me, you best listen to me if I got something to say that's that important. So I told my mom, I'm calling the police. I'm calling the police right now and have them do a welfare check on you. Because if you can't hang up that phone, something's wrong here. And I called the police because she didn't hang up the phone. Now, how scared was I? She lives in McGregor, which is 2 hours up north. So I couldn't just drop everything and run over there. My brother was in Florida. So the police came to the door. And she lives in a small community, so the police officer knew who she was. And we got it all situated. But then it went to the conversation of, why are you answering the phone when you don't recognize the phone number? That is something that is so prevalent today. And I can't stress that enough. If somebody wants to talk to you and you don't recognize the number, they're going to leave you a message. They're going to leave you a message. I heard this morning on the news I was listening to, they talk about this artificial intelligence. I'm not sure if any of you heard about this, but it is so incredibly scary that they can fake our children's voices. And a woman was called by a scammer and said that her daughter had been kidnapped and wanted money. And they recorded her daughter's voice and could make a message, and it sounded like it was her daughter. Yeah, please tell everybody you know, do not answer your phone unless you recognize the number. And if you don't, they'll leave a message if they want to talk to you. That's how scary these scams are. They are so convincing that it's just unbelievable how they can mess with any of us. It doesn't have to just be an older person. So examples of financial is intercepting checks or cash, maybe a Social Security check if they get that in the mail, that type of a thing. Power of attorney fraud. So when you sign a document for power of attorney, you have to have your wits about you. You cannot legally sign a document if you have dementia or if you're a vulnerable adult. If you can't take care of yourself, make your own decisions, you can't legally sign a power of attorney. But it happens every day. Adult children are bringing their parents into a lawyer and they're signing a power of attorney. When that parent might not even be able to write their name. So that's something else that is out there. Befriending an elder to get elaborate gifts. We had a caregiver that she was an aide, and she was going into the homes and was negotiating with our patients for their belongings or stealing their belongings. So that's another type of financial abuse. Or convincing an elder to hand over your money or personal property. You know, our society is so, we're giving people, and we want to give and help, and maybe in their mind, that's what they're doing. And then coercing the person to change their estate planning documents. Now, that probably more so in families than not. So you might have someone in the family that wants to convince the parent to sign everything over to them instead of other siblings or all the siblings, that type of a thing. And then ways to recognize elder abuse is to pay attention to the observable physical signs. So you might see unexplained weight loss, or they look malnourished. Their clothes might be sagging, hanging off of them. They may have what they call temporal wasting, where right here at the temples, it kind of sinks in, or their cheeks are hollowed. Another one is that they look, and that goes in with looking frail. They could have bed sores. When somebody is laying in bed for a long time or sitting in a wheelchair for a long time and not repositioning, you're going to get pressure points where that happens. And so it might start out as a reddened area, but then because the skin is so much thinner and there's that constant pressure, the skin's going to break open. And then you have a bed sore. And you have to have proper nutrition to heal a sore. And that plays into, I have to talk her out because she's so wonderful. Melissa Bloomfield is one of my hospice nurses. She is a blessing to Mary T. Hospice and to every patient that she's ever had. And so a hospice nurse is a very special person, and I'm so lucky to have her. She's wonderful. So also is pain when touched. If somebody is hollering out in pain when you touch them, you might not know what's going on. It could be a bruise. It could be a broken bone. Or unexplained bruises, burns, or scars. Poor hygiene, and appearing lonely, depressed, confused, withdrawn. Changes in behavior, they may be agitated. They may look agitated. They may be more confused than they normally are. They appear helpless. They could be really depressed, and so they withdraw. So I want to say that just because you see these things doesn't mean that they're being abused. It doesn't mean that. But there probably is a reason that you might be seeing these things. So what I would suggest is that if you have a loved one or somebody that you know, that you're seeing these things, you're observing over time, keep a journal, write it down, because you're not going to remember. write down what you're seeing and when you saw it, even with dates and times, because then you can start to see if there's a pattern. If it's your parent, talk to the doctor or bring that parent to the doctor. And report the symptoms to the doctor. Now, the doctor's going to want to know all this, like, well, how long has this been going on? And when did you see this? So you're helping the doctor with this information. So just know that when you see stuff like this, it might not be abuse, but there is probably a reason for what you're seeing. I also have included resources on this list. The Domestic Abuse Hotline and the Alexandra House Domestic Abuse Shelter in Anoka County. They are a 24/7 phone number that you could call for support. There also is navigators that will help you navigate the aging life and finding care professionals if you need it. Legal, any legal problems or legal concerns, issues, power of attorney. There's an elder care website, Family Caregiver Alliance for caregivers. That is something that if you are a caregiver or know someone who is a caregiver, look that up. Because caregivers, that's probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. And you don't really realize how hard it is until you're in it. And unfortunately, I have seen a caregiver pass away before my hospice patient because it took everything, and it was a man taking care of his wife. And it took everything out of him, and he died of a stroke. So caregivers they're a great thing, but you need help. You need help. So that's a good website to go to. The Alzheimer's Association, wealth of information. Even if you don't know the person has Alzheimer's, it doesn't really matter. But if you think they have dementia, great information. Support groups for families. There's a lot of support groups in churches and senior centers. We have one here at Zion. Scams and abuse. There's a website that you can get more information. And then technology, which is really good too, because that also includes your computer, your phones, your iPads, that type of a thing. So you think, okay, who do I report to, and how do I report this if I feel I want to? So just know that you don't have to, as a reporter, it's not your job, anybody's job, to say, well, you don't have to prove it. That's not our job, is to prove it. The people that we're going to report to, that's their job. They investigate it. They do that work. We're just reporters. We're voluntary reporters. Now, if you work in a healthcare setting, then you will be a mandated reporter. Like I'm a mandated reporter, Krista is, Melissa is. Anybody that works in a medical field are mandated reporters for the most part. Tricia, not everybody. Well, then you could be a voluntary one. Doesn't matter if if you see it and think there is a problem or something you want to be to report. Yes. Yep. And your identity will never be known. Nobody is going to ever tell anyone who reported whatever they reported. So you don't have to worry that someone's going to find out who did it, who reported. Questions that they may ask when you report is they're going to want to know what's happening, or if there was specific issue, they're going to want to know what happened. Well, what happened or what is happening? Who did it happen to? They're going to want to know that person's name. Who did it happen to? When did it happen? If you know. You might not know. That's okay. Where did it happen? You might not know that again. And who is responsible for the abuse, exploitation, or neglect? Now, that you probably won't know, but maybe you will know, particularly if it's somebody that you're close to. You may know. But again, they're not going to know you reported that. So at this time, I do want to, I did not, for some reason, I can't believe I didn't do that, write down the number for the Anoka County Adult Protection. I've got the number if anybody's interested. It's 763-324-1410. And an adult protection social worker will answer the phone, and it's 24/7. So that's a good number to know. So at this time, I want to welcome Krista. I had introduced her a little earlier. Krista has worked in what they call MARC reports. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about MARC reports. And then after she has done that, we can open it up to questions if anybody has any questions.
You pretty much said most of it. You said most of it. So yes, I work in most of the time it's in short-term rehab. So people usually are leaving the hospital and they're coming for some rehab. And at some of those times, you have what would have been a vulnerable adult report. So they would have come with a SOAR, or it would have been self-neglect, where they weren't taking the best care of themselves, and that's now why they're at these facilities, to either improve or to potentially sometimes even stay there long-term. I think it's important, just like Leslie said, to always push how confidential it is whenever you are reporting. And they usually will contact the social worker that at a facility, they will contact the social worker that you're working with, or that is working with that individual, and they will usually just do a follow-up question on, okay, well, did they go, if they went back into the community, did they go with resources? If not, then they follow up. If they didn't go back in the community, then it's more, okay, do you have any information on the potential, I guess the big word is perpetrator, of the potential person that did it. It's just giving them all the information that you can. You guys might not have a lot, but they might have other people in the community that they may have had other reports on that they can always follow up with too, to give them more information to put the actions in place that are necessary. So other than that, I don't have much more. You kind of covered most of it.
Okay. That is important because if there has already been a report, let's say you're going to call and report, if there's already been a report, they know that. The social workers know that. And so the more reports you have, builds your case. So my suggestion is don't hold back. If you feel like you're concerned, it brings you some concern, report it. Again, it's not our job to know if this is really happening or not. What we're doing is we're trying to protect somebody because it might be. And I would be really glad that I did report it. And you won't know. They're not going to follow up with you. That's not, we're just looking after one another is really what it is. And I'm so glad that they have these things in place. So I would really encourage people to be observant and just call or talk to somebody about it if you're concerned or worried. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Judy.
Where can you go to get the report, like what facilities in the area, how many reports that they have?
Do you know, Krista?
I believe MPH has a portion of their website that can show you like how many reports were throughout the year. It might be more based on the center, on like throughout the center, like nursing care through their annual surveys, because we do get surveyed every year to make sure we are keeping in compliance. Yep, MDH, which is the Minnesota Department of Health.
Yeah, and just put that in the search because there's all kinds of stuff at MDH, lots and lots. Yeah.
We moved here about 3 years ago, and our former membership was up in Aiken.
I'm going to do this quick.
And we would get together on Friday mornings, and we'd have breakfast, and we'd cook our, probably not a real healthy breakfast, but anyway, we always had meat and eggs. But anyway, the point is that we had a young fellow that was invited, and he was coming, and he was in high school, and he was developmentally delayed. And what we found out was that his brothers and his mother were siphoning off the money that was given to him for his support and so forth. And we were concerned about that, and we really didn't know what to do. And at that time, my mother was in a long-term care facility. And so I knew some of the people in family services, and I asked one of these people, what do we do? And she gave me a phone number. And of course, we weren't related or part of this young man's family. And we certainly weren't professionally trained in that work. So through our concern, she gave me a phone number. And she said, you don't have to tell them who you are. Give them what information you can about the individual. And so that's what we did. And we never heard anything more. And the social worker told us that we wouldn't, that they respect their privacy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that because something like that, they will investigate. Absolutely will investigate. So, anyone else? I know this isn't a wonderful topic, but, another thing I wanted to say before I get done. In your packets, there is a hospice flyer. And so I would be remiss not to talk about just a little tiny bit about my profession. And so Mary T is located in Coon Rapids. We have been in the hospice itself has started in 2009. We're a small hospice. We go to wherever the patient is at. So if they're in their home, we go to their homes. If they're in a facility, we go to the facility. Assisted livings, group homes, skilled nursing facilities. And in that flyer, I'm not going to go through it all, but in that flyer, it tells you what are the eligibility for hospice care and what are the services that we provide. And it's a really good flyer. If you know of anybody that's maybe approaching that area in their life, that journey, you can talk to them now a little bit more because you've got some information. I believe our office number is on there. So you can always call that number if you just have questions. It doesn't have to be you have somebody that you know. It just if you have questions. Yeah, I know hospice is a scary word. And a lot of times people, they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to know about it until they have to know about it. And then they don't want to know about it. That's what I always say. But it's such a wonderful program. And statistically, people live longer on hospice care than they do without it. Because of all of the support that they get from the nurses coming out, the social workers coming out, we've got aid services. We have spiritual care if you're interested in that. We have massage therapy. We have music therapy. So there's a lot of people coming and supporting the caregiver and the patient. It's not just, hospice isn't just for the patient, it's actually for the family and the caregiver as well. And time again, I hear, I wished I wouldn't have waited as long as I did, because it really takes that burden away, and they're not walking this path by themselves. So tell everybody you know, don't be afraid of hospice. Yeah.
It used to be that hospice had the expectation of death coming along. Is that true anymore?
Well, it can, and it cannot. Like, I'll tell you, eligibility for a doctor to write an order for hospice, you have to have a diagnosis that the doctor feels, in his or her professional opinion, that the person would have 6 months or less to live. Now, we all know that the doctor isn't God, and so you could live longer than 6 months. Absolutely, many people do. And you can graduate from hospice. We're graduating somebody next week who has been on our hospice care. Because of all of the supports that they have gotten, they're starting to feel better. And maybe their medications were changed up a little bit. Maybe some medications were taken away. They're starting to eat better. They're starting to just feel better. And they might be starting to gain some weight. So when we don't see a decline and we start seeing, they're gaining weight, they're feeling better, all kinds of stuff, then we need to discharge them or graduate them from hospice. And then if at some time it goes south again, you can go back onto hospice. So yes, some people come onto hospice and pass quite quickly. Some people go onto hospice and may pass in 2 or 3 months. Some people go onto hospice. We've had a patient who's been on hospice for over a year. And the reason we've been able to keep this person is because this person has continued to show a decline. Even though it is slow, they've able to show a decline. And so we've been able to keep them on hospice and support them in their end-of-life journey. So I'm here to educate people on hospice. That is my, I believe it's a passion of mine, because I've seen and I know what it can do for the patient and for the families. It's an incredible gift. And so I think what I would encourage you all is don't shy away from that name, that word, and share it.
Isn't there, though, the palliative care, there's something before hospice?
There can be, and palliative care is comfort care, and hospice is comfort care. But right now people get confused with, well, my doctor says I should go on to palliative care. Well, palliative care is hospice care, but in the bigger hospital systems, they have a department called palliative care. That's a little bit different than hospice care. Hospice care is when you've decided, okay, I'm no longer wanting to have any tests. I no longer want to go to the doctor anymore. I no longer want to go to the hospital anymore. That's hospice care. I want comfort cares. Palliative care in a larger hospital system, you can continue to do all those things that I just said. And a nurse will come out and visit you maybe once every 6 weeks. So that's another question that you can talk to your doctor about, because people get confused when my doctor said, or they call and say, well, do you provide palliative care? So then I said, well, yes, we do provide palliative care, because palliative care is comfort care, but we don't belong to a bigger hospital system. So what has your doctor talked to you about hospice? And have they used the word hospice? And if they have, I encourage them to call their doctor again, just to get that cleared up. Because palliative care is great. It's for chronic long-term issues. It's a wonderful place for it. But it's a little different than hospice, where we're at the end of our life journey. But it doesn't, you're not going to die tomorrow, hopefully. Some people do, because they've waited till the end. And of course, we don't know when somebody is going to pass, but the body really shows signs. We don't need a blood test or a urine test or an x-ray to know. The nurses, they know how to read the body and the body signs. This is their specialty, and for hospice. And so it's a comfort cares, and we want to support your goals for your end of life journey, because we're all going to be there, all of us. And we want to support your goals. We're not going to come in and be the driver of your bus. We're not going to do that. We're going to support your goals for what you want for yourself and for your family, your loved one. So I thank everyone for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and maybe I'll be back.
Thank you.